So what the founders of Aspen were noticing happening is that individuals who really needed service dogs or could benefit from them weren't meeting those very specific criteria that existed in those charity schools. We need the dogs to be able to, be able to come up with on their own that they may need to break a cue that you've given them to go and respond to a medical issue. Somebody just walking in off the street came into our school and saw what was happening. They would probably have no idea what it was about, or just looks like chaos sometimes. We're not training generic service dogs that could probably do an okay job for a lot of people with, a mental health challenge. We're really trying to train a dog very specifically for that one individual's needs.
Welcome back to Tales of Fluff. I'm AJ.
And I'm Emily. We hope you are all doing well and are excited for today's episode. With that being said, today's episode is actually a special one for us. For the first time on Tales of Fluff, we're chatting with our very first international guest.
And when we heard back from this guest, we were so excited and thrilled that they wanted to join us. I mean, we always are so grateful and we get very excited with all of our guests. But when we finally accomplished getting our very first out of the country guest, we couldn't believe we already reached that goal. Now, when you hear where our guest is from, and if you're listening from the US, you may feel that it's more local, but to us, it was such a huge goal to reach, even if they weren't from the other side of the world yet.
Keyword yet. But no, we really are just so excited. So, okay, we're going to stop yapping and we're going to get into this episode and let you guys know where our guest is from. So this is a subject we have spoken about in the past, but for us, it's always so interesting to hear the incredible impact service and therapy dogs can have on someone's life.
Absolutely. And as always, this episode did not disappoint. And before we move on, we just wanted to take a minute and apologize. We haven't been able to upload an episode recently due to the many storms that we've been getting here in the Midwest. So our internet's been patchy, our power's been in and out, it's been storm after storm, flooding after flooding, and we're hoping that we're getting to the end of this storm season. In this episode, we had the pleasure of chatting with Caelan from Aspen Service Dogs in Canada. We talked about stories and experiences of people gaining their independence, the emotional goodbyes, and moments that changed lives forever.
It was amazing hearing all of this and getting a behind the scenes look into service and therapy dogs once again. So grab your pet, get comfortable, and let's jump in. We started out by asking Caelan, when did Aspen Service Dogs get started and what inspired it?
So Aspen Service Dogs has been operating for about seven to 8 years now. Really what inspired Aspen. So there's two original founders to Aspen. One retired about a year ago and I stepped into their place when they retired. And originally what inspired Aspen is just a big need in the market. So a lot of service dog schools, at least in Canada, where we're operating, are set up more as charity programs, I guess. And there's very specific criteria that individuals need to be able to meet in order to qualify. So, for example, some of those programs may only accept children with autism up to 9 years old. So what the founders of Aspen were noticing happening is that individuals who really needed service dogs or could benefit from them weren't meeting those very specific criteria that existed in those charity schools. Or if somebody may be qualified for a service dog as, a child with autism, when that initial service dog that they had was ready to retire, and now maybe that person is 17 or 18 years old, they would no longer qualify for those programs. So they were in a spot where they needed a service dog. They had a service dog working with them for 10 years, but they no longer qualified for some of those programs. And the other thing that really Aspen was noticing and what was inspiring it is some individuals with maybe more complex medical requirements, so maybe they have 2 or 3 different presenting disabilities, they would again not qualify for programs or were having a trouble finding programs to be able to take on their cases. So Aspen was really fortunate in that our training director and one of the founders has about 25 years experience as a guide and service dog instructor. So we were fairly well set up to be able to take on those more complicated cases that a lot of other schools weren't willing to touch. So that was, I guess, really what was inspiring it is just individuals who needed service dogs that had really no ability through existing programs to get the dogs that they needed.
I found that so interesting because when you think of service dogs, or at least when I do, you think that all programs accept the person who needs them, and that person can just go in and get a dog. But hearing how complex it can really be, such as the age requirements, and some programs only train dogs for certain disabilities, it gives you a full picture of how difficult it could really be to get a service dog.
Yeah, I never thought about that either. I mean, like you said, it seems like a lot of programs would train for most, if not all, disabilities. And the age requirements were super surprising to me because, as he said, if that individual got a service dog when they were a kid and now they're 18 years old and they need another, they wouldn't qualify anymore. And since we talked to a few people who work with service dogs and hear how they can be someone's lifeline, I just can't wrap my mind around the fact of them unfortunately losing that dog and then they can't get another because they outgrew the program. I guess for me, it was just interesting to learn that.
Definitely. However, I liked how Aspen saw that need and stepped up to help. And they even built a program that more people who need them can have access to service dogs. So now the foundation is there, and Aspen has something amazing. But we wanted to know what Caelan personally loves most about working with service dogs.
I think the big thing for me is that it's always different, both on the dog side of things and on the people side of things. So, I mean, you're combining 2 living things, and every single one of them is neat. So, we really place a lot of pride and importance on coming up with the right match between that client and the perfect dog for them. So we're not training kind of, I guess, generic service dogs that could probably do an okay job for a lot of people with, a mental health challenge. We're really trying to train a dog very specifically for that one individual's needs. So, I mean, we try and go as far as there's one client we're working with right now who's a musician and an artist. So they're sending us, recordings of their band playing some of the venues that they're at and where they like to spend their time painting. And we're trying to expose the dog we're training for them to, those sights and sounds and environments that specific individual is going to be living and working in. So that's what I love is it's not just the same spreadsheet every single day, day in and day out. It's every day is totally different challenges. The dogs learn differently. The clients are all different. So it keeps it very, very, very exciting. And you're able to really get to know these people and kind of put yourself in their shoes while you're trying to find the perfect dog for them.
That is absolutely incredible to hear how Aspen tries their best to get to know the individual so that they can train their dog accordingly. Because if you think about it, and even as Kaylin mentioned, these people are with this dog 24/7. So it only makes sense to train the dog to be in that person's environment.
Exactly. And I like the example he gave. Not everyone lives a quiet, calm life. Some people may be around loud music or big crowds of people. So, the importance of a dog being able to be in their person's environment, I can really see that importance. I can also see why Caitlin would enjoy that so much. One on one with not just the dog, but the person too, and really figuring out how you can help that individual.
Absolutely. Now, when working with dogs, there can definitely be funny or unexpected moments. So we asked Kaylin, what's the most funny or unexpected thing he has seen from a dog in training?
I guess the most fun days here, some of the things that you just kind of, you're telling your friends and family, here's what I did at work today. But some of the things that come to mind for this is we try to do a lot of work training the dogs, for unexpected things that they might see when they're out working in public or when they're with their people. So we try to do a lot of work training them on distractions and impulse control. So what that looks like sometimes, I mean, even just last week, we have one of our dogs that was having a little bit of a hard time with strangers and some things that they would see in public. So we have a big box of masks and Halloween costumes and remote controlled animals and cars. And so that was kind of the whole morning. It was just popping in and out of our training space and putting on a gorilla mask and a hoodie and running through and making kind of weird sounds and jumping around in front of dogs. We'll have what looks like a food fight at work sometimes, where we have dogs that are settled and nice and being patient, and we're throwing food around and pretending to cook and throwing stuff all over the place. And so, somebody just walking in off the street came into our school and saw what was happening. They would probably have no idea what it was about, or just looks like chaos sometimes, but it all has a purpose. So we try to have fun and we try to come up with any different things that we can think of to expose the dogs to.
Okay. I would absolutely pay to see them doing that.
For real. Could you imagine just randomly seeing them in front of a dog with a whole gorilla mask on and not understanding anything behind it? But it does seem like it would be such a funny and cool part about how they train their service dogs.
It does. And with service dogs, we often see them do some of the most amazing things to help people. So we had to ask what task or skill that Caelan has seen that always amazes new people.
Think probably the most common one that people always ask us about is some of the scent detection tasks. So if you're thinking diabetic alert, for example, the dogs are able to pick up those changes in blood sugar even faster than the continuous glucose monitors are able to. Sometimes even up to a couple of minutes before those CGMs are able to pick up changes in blood sugar. So those are incredible things that the dogs can do. One of the other tasks that we just recently have a dog graduating with it's kind of a neat one. It's just a very complicated series of things that the dog is expected to be able to do. So this is one where the dog's going to be sleeping in quite a young child's room. And that child has a history of, in the middle of the night, they'll sometimes get up and leave their room and don't always make the best decisions. So they may be, in the kitchen and playing with utensils, or going into the basement and just getting into things in the house that aren't really safe for that child. So we've trained this dog to, as soon as the child leaves their bedroom door, the dog will go and run to the parents' room, and they're using their nose to start nudging the parents until the parent is awake. And then the dog is going to go and do a search through the house to go and find where that child is and lead the parents to that child. So, yeah, quite a complicated series of tasks that that dog needs to be able to do. And that dog is kind of deciding on their own when that's required based on the child crossing that threshold of their room in the middle of the night.
It always amazes us when we talk to somebody who trains service dogs about how incredible their skills actually are. Like, we're used to the family pets, but hearing everything that dogs can do is amazing.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. And I mean, you just kind of build up these skills, and none of the little incremental steps on their own are complicated. You always have a lot of people saying, how do you train the dogs to do these things? And it really just takes breaking it down into tiny, tiny little incremental steps, and then just building that, one after another over a long period of time. So it's not rocket science. It's just, how do you break that down into the right series of steps for the dog to understand? And then it's just put in enough hours to make it really, sink home for the dog. And I think too, a lot of the time, what we're trying to build in these dogs is, we always say, we're not building obedience robots. We're not training just, competition, obedience, down, stay for an hour without flinching. We want these dogs to be able to, we call it intelligent disobedience. So we need the dogs to be able to, be able to come up with on their own that they may need to break a cue that you've given them to go and respond to a medical issue. So for example, we have one of our dogs that was doing seizure response. And this was a few months ago, and we were having lunch with a client and this dog. And that client had a seizure in the restaurant, and that dog was settled nicely under the tables, laying down, just about asleep while we were having a meal. And the dog needed to recognize that their person needed them and break that downstay and go up to the person and respond to the seizure. So they sometimes need to decide not to listen to you because you need something else from them.
Wow, that was just incredible to hear. From the diabetic detection work a dog can do to basically making its own decision of when to step in to help a child to make sure that child remains safe. And, when I first heard this, it was just in awe. I mean, dogs can do amazing things. Definitely if you're talking about maybe a service dog or a working dog in general. But when you hear it to this extent, it just makes you realize how much work, effort, and just overall how amazing dogs can really be.
And I don't know if you caught it, but when he was talking about the diabetic detection work, he actually said that dogs can sense the blood sugar changes faster than the continuous glucose monitors can, and sometimes even a couple of minutes before. So to me, that's just absolutely crazy how much a dog can really do for someone.
That was very interesting. And I wouldn't even have guessed that was possible. And also, the other example that he shared to think that a dog needs to be able to pick up on even the smallest sign or maybe even snap out of their sleep to respond. And they do exactly that. At this point, I'm just lost for words. Absolutely incredible.
Right. It was awesome to hear how that dog attended to that person, even though they were in a public environment and the dog was just basically sleeping. That just shows how much effort Aspen puts into their dogs to make sure that they are helping their people to the fullest.
Exactly. And at this point, we have heard some amazing examples of how service dogs can help their people. So, our next question we asked was, when did Caelan realize the impact a service dog could truly have on someone's life?
There's so many of these moments. I think that we really see that with every dog that graduates. It's always a really, really hard thing for our team when one of these dogs graduates and when we spend 2 years and a few thousand hours training these dogs and they really become part of, sometimes even part of our families. I mean, our team generally has, at least one of these dogs staying with us and they really are part of your life. So it's always really hard to see them go and to see them graduate. But, that first week that they're going home, we set this up, we call it team training. So it's basically a full-time week of training that that person is going to do with our team while they're getting used to handling their dog. And, seeing just that bond forming, almost immediately. And a lot of times these are clients that have waited multiple years for this dog. And so to be able to see just them absolutely melt into these dogs and some of the stories of just independence and, just hope coming into their lives as they start to build these partnerships with their dogs is pretty amazing. And it's also really nice too to kind of see, this dog working independently and away from our trainers. And it's kind of like, a kid almost graduating school and it's like, no, mom and dad, like I've got this. I can go and do this myself. And we'll just see them out working and see that client feeling safe and secure and more independent and happy. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing to see. And we'll get, it's pretty common for us to get photos and updates from the grads. And there's so many clients that are doing trips that they never thought would be possible or returning to work when they haven't been, healthy or able to work in years. And things like that are really nice to see them regaining independence and confidence and having that support system in their life with this dog by their side.
It was awesome to hear how Kalen answered this question. It would have been easy for him to maybe say when he first seen a dog open a fridge for someone, but the fact that he went into depth and he mentioned how before these dogs go to their people, they are already a part of the trainer's family since they do spend so much time with them.
And when he said, when they see a dog working independently for the first time, it's like a kid graduating from school and saying to their mom and dad, they got this. That almost got to me, not gonna lie. Because while we have not personally trained a service dog, we do have dogs of our own, and I feel to a certain point you can relate with this. Because when you have a puppy and they're growing up and finally doing what you have trained them to do on their own, it does get emotional sometimes because you realize your hard work paid off and that connection with your dog just grows. So I can only imagine with the amount of time that they spend on their dogs and the effort that they put into their dogs, how emotional that would be. And I think Caelan summed that up nicely.
Yeah. And then you look back to when your dog was a puppy and how far they have come. And that's just teaching basic obedience. So I can only imagine training a service dog and how proud they must be to see that dog doing the work on their own.
Definitely. So we have heard and learned so much already. And with our next question, we wanted to touch on even more of how dogs help people gain freedom. We asked Caelan, has he ever witnessed someone experience freedom for the first time because of their dog?
Absolutely. One example that I can think of is a fairly recent graduate. So this was just a young woman who had been waiting for this dog for quite a long period of time and really struggled to be out in public on their own, just didn't feel safe, didn't feel like they were or had the health or had the supports to be able to go out in public. So always needed to have family members or a friend with them to feel comfortable going out in public. And just during that first team training week, so probably 2 or 3 days of being out with their dog, and they were still staying at the hotel. So it was a client from out of town who stays at a hotel for this team training week. And they came into our office that morning and I was just catching up with them saying, how are things going? How are you doing building this relationship with your dog? And they just had the biggest smile on their face. And it's like, you seem so happy. What's going on this morning? And they're like, well, I had breakfast by myself in the hotel, like in the hotel restaurant this morning. And, it might not seem like a big deal to somebody else, but, it's been a number of years since I've been able to go out and do something like that on my own. And I just woke up this morning feeling really good and just went and had breakfast by myself downstairs and was able to do that with my dogs. It's simple things that probably a lot of us take for granted, but these are things that people haven't been able to do in years. And the dogs are able to open those doors for them, it's so wonderful to see people just that appreciation for daily things that we sometimes take for granted. It really makes you appreciate the little things.
What an example. What really caught my attention was how happy the person was that they accomplished doing something on their own. And he was basically saying this isn't a big task to most, but it was to this person. And because they had that dog, they had the confidence to reach that goal.
Yeah, and I liked how he really shows the full picture. Like you think of a service dog and you think of them doing these big tasks and thought out skills, but they also help people with all wins in life. Like maybe just going out of the house or having breakfast in a public setting. And to these individuals, this is a huge step, and that's completely understandable. And it's awesome that they have these incredible dogs to help them.
Absolutely. And I get what you're saying, and I agree. Hearing all this just gives us a different perspective of service dogs and helps us understand them more. Now, we know Caelan has been working with service dogs for years. And working with dogs, or any animal, there are always those ones that maybe are hard to say goodbye, or you just are really proud of them. And it makes you emotional to think about them. So we asked Caelan, is there a dog whose story still makes you emotional when you think about them?
There's definitely a few that are more emotional ones, probably on a positive side and also emotional, kind of on a more sad side. So maybe share a couple of stories with you. So on I guess a more sad or more challenging side of it, where it definitely makes our team emotional is, I mean, these are living things. They're not robots that we're building in a factory. It's a dog that we get attached to, that the clients get attached to. They're working with this person and having an amazing life. But at some point, that dog gets old, gets sick, has to retire. So those are always really, really difficult ones to see. And they're things that our team is part of these dogs' lives and these clients' lives. We're not just, sending you your dog and saying, thanks, good luck. So there was, one just recently that one of the founders of Aspen, it was one of the first dogs that she had trained in Canada. So this was probably 15 years ago. She trained this dog. And this was, coming to a time when that dog was just getting older. So that was one of the first calls that client made, was to Aspen and saying, hey, this dog is getting old. I think I'm going to have to put them down. They're just not doing well anymore. That quality of life isn't there. And, we want your school and your trainer to be there with us through this. So it's, incredible that relationship is there and that partnership is there, but it's always, so hard to see that kind of full circle coming. And then on maybe a positive emotional story. So we had one client who was off work just because of health challenges, but was working in the fire department and was not able to return to work because of some fairly significant PTSD. And this was a dog that we placed with them, but the updates that we kept receiving from them were just getting more and more positive. So, having that dog, they were ultimately able to return to work, and the dog was going to the fire department and just that regained independence. And they ultimately received an award, that the firefighter received an award from his department and from the city. But we got pictures from them of that dog actually going up with him and receiving the award with him, because he'd been part of what had enabled that to be possible in the client's life. So that was, amazing to see, and always something that I look back on that, certainly was an emotional one.
Yeah, what an amazing story. And I think I speak for all of the dog owners that that's like our worst fear to, have a dog, see it through its life, and then finally after 15, 16, or even less years, being there to put it down. But to know that it served its purpose and it helped people, that must feel amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the dog and the person just had absolutely the best possible life together, and we're just the best of friends. And these dogs are with their people 24 hours a day, everywhere that you can possibly go, through everything. So it's, it's a lot when they ultimately have to retire or you end up losing them.
The fact they wanted the trainer there for the dog in its last moment speaks for itself. The love these trainers have for these dogs. And I can definitely see how this would be emotional for the trainers to know that you helped better someone's life, and that a dog increased someone's well being is such a powerful moment, even though it's heartbreaking to lose a dog or any pet.
They had to have felt so honored that client wanted them there for that heartbreaking moment. And then the other example he shared about the firefighter was just so powerful. To know that person couldn't even return to work. And then after getting the dog, they didn't just return, they even won an award. Like, how amazing is that?
I was thinking the same thing when he was telling us. Most of us go to work every day, maybe even dislike going sometimes. To hear how someone wanted to go to work but couldn't makes you appreciate being able to go to work. And it was an amazing ending, with them winning an award and including their dog in it, because that dog helped them get to that point.
It was really such a sweet moment. Now, this episode was packed with amazing examples and experiences. And maybe you are listening and want to work with service dogs yourself in the future. If so, our next question is for you. We asked Caelan what advice he would give to someone if they wanted to start working with service dogs.
So I think if somebody is thinking about service dogs specifically, so if they're interested in dog training and they're saying, service dogs is really what's interesting to me, what I really want to be doing, I would encourage them to really think about the people side of this. And hopefully that's something that comes through in, the messages and the stories, as well as it's dogs are just one piece of this, but we're not just training dogs in isolation. We're working with people on a daily basis who have fairly significant medical challenges and are really looking to you to, or get to know them, to understand their life, to understand their requirements. and then to be able to build up the most amazing partner to fit in with their lives. And then after that, you're there for, the working life of that dog and of that team, helping to support them and helping to coach them through daily situations. So if somebody's considering this, really make sure that you love that side of it as well. You want to help people, you want to make a difference in their lives. You're not just, head down training dogs without working with people. So make sure that you understand that and learn about disabilities, learn about the medical side of it as well, and make sure that you really enjoy that.
His advice was to the point and made a lot of sense. Make sure you also look into the people side of the job and do your research and learn fully about the areas, including the medical side of it.
It was amazing advice. And overall, just an amazing conversation we had. Caelan was so nice, and you can really tell his passion for what he does. So we want to thank Caelan again for joining us and talking about service dogs and just how much of an impact they can truly have on someone's life. If you would like to check out the incredible Aspen Service Dogs, the link will be in the description.
Yes. And we just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has subscribed or who likes, comments, or even shares our videos. We appreciate it more than we can put into words. But today we aren't asking for any of that. All we ask is if you know someone in your life who trains service dogs, or maybe a video comes up while you're scrolling on TikTok or on YouTube, thank them. Thank them because their hard work and effort should never go unnoticed.
Until next time, remember, these dogs aren't just changing lives. They're opening doors people thought were closed forever.